face quickly!
Alrighty, and hello everyone, and welcome back to another Borderlands 4 video by Damian Pyro. Today I'm going to be showing off my Captain Kairos whip build. Now, I'm going to make this video a bit early. I was trying to wait till Ultimate Vault Hunter 5 and when I had all my gear pieces together that I wanted for it. But I see everybody else already dropping whip videos, and I don't want everybody to just think that I am copying them, because if you've been following my streams, you can tell that I've been doing this since before even the update happened, working with this whip thing. Anyway, everyone, it's only gotten better since then, and let's get into it right now. We're going to show off a little bit of the damage. The reason I'm doing this on the test dummies right now, instead of going and melting bosses and all that good shit, is because, well, I'm only in Ultimate Vault Hunter 1, and melting an Ultimate Hunter 1 boss is really just nothing. Alright? But theoretically, what you want to do here is you want to get your Berserk active from activating your Forge skill, whichever one you happen to be using at the time, or using the Firewall. And we're going to be building up insane damage over here with our whip. Every whip, for some reason, isn't practicing Groundbreaker, even though it is technically melee damage from our class mod. However, you can build up all your stacks, and then, boom, just asinine damage from this. Like, we're already in the millions. You can quickly go from the millions to the billions now, and then from billions on into trillions. Like, let's see here. Like, already hitting trillions, and just going to asinine numbers from there. This game doesn't even know how to register all this. It just pops up as negative numbers. And it just stacks up over and over and over. And then, you know, you can use the whips to keep your build going forever! Because every time we use the whips, it extends the duration of our action skill. It also starts storing up more damage for our whole little, Groundbreaker thing. Like I said, for some reason the whips don't proc the Groundbreaker, but the shield dash does. Something with the action skill mechanics. Anyway, let's get into the gear and then the skill trees. Also, if you guys are watching this later, I do not have timestamps right now. I will be adding those later. Alright, let's start off getting into the equipment first. Alright, so the guns don't really matter. I'm using a Cryo Wombo combo, a Cryo and Shock freaking Complex Root, a Cryo Totalitarian Chaosin, and then I'm using this here bod that I happen to get the Torque Stickies on. I'd prefer if it didn't have Sniper Rifle as a secondary fire, and it had Assault Rifle, or SMG even, but I digress. It just works for now. Nothing really important here. So you do want to use a mini triple bypass. The one I have right now has tank, which will help with survivability, but I would prefer if I could find one that had hard hitter. I just haven't gotten lucky with that yet for the extra melee damage, so we're kind of held back on that. I am currently using a Vampiric Swarm with Bloodthirsty on it in case, you know, you get down to them health levels, you can get yourself back up, but also you can very easily use the crit knife with this build, with the damage amp, to do yet even more damage. And mine happens to have express, so I can throw my knives more often. Or you can be so bold as to use a slippy, which everybody else doing whip blades right now are, you know, using the slippy to build up their stacks faster on certain things. But, you know, I don't really have that good of a slippy. It's level 49 and just explosive, but it still hits pretty hard whenever I do use it, but it's not a main focus. In fact, you can use any of these three ordnance or honestly any ordnance you want on this build. Ordnance is a big focus on it, like, at all. But also you'd benefit more from having grenade, you know, ordnance, because you can throw them while everything's active. Right? I am using a Shatterweight class mod. Now I've seen where they can roll with also ordnance damage and not just action skill duration, right? And that would give you yet an even bigger bonus, but the main thing is this one that I have has 5 stacks in the Berserk passive, which we want as much as that as possible, so definitely rocking this bad boy. And also action skill duration does not hurt us at all either. That actually helps a lot. And then last but not least, we are using a Watts for Dinner shield. Right, this is actually an important thing because we do want the Overshield Eater for the bonus shock damage while having Overshield, and because of the way we're set up, we have constant Overshield, just non-stop. And now this one here has Power Booster on it, you know, and that gun damage will actually be applying into our melee damage due to things that we have, but only like 5% of it, but it's alright, it's still another boost. Nothing too big, nothing too small, and this one has Sturdy, which gives us a little more tankiness. I prefer to have Siphon on mine, so that when I'm doing damage, it just adds even more overshield into everything, but this is good enough for right now. Alright, and then also what type of enhancement mod you use doesn't really matter. There's not really any ones that can enhance our melee damage. I would just try to get at least gun damage and gun critical roll on everything, and whatever other rolls you get on it don't really matter. I would like to have like gun splash damage or fire rate on this one in particular, but like I said, it's not really necessary. As long as you at least get the gun damage and gun critical damage, because those will help a lot with everything. And I'm using a torque one, so this is why actually I'm using the bod with the stickies, because we can do a lot of damage with that. Whenever we don't have our action skill up, or if for some reason we can manage to get knocked down, but we're pretty tanky. If we're doing everything right, we shouldn't be going down. It's only if we play around too much. Firmware we are using is 3 out of 3 in Action Fist. Alright, which will get our melee damage, action skill damage, and then yet even more action skill damage if we get a melee kill. That's really nice. And then on top of that, we're using 2 stacks of Real Big Fist for yet even more massive amounts of melee damage. Now, you could opt for using 3 Big Fist and 2 action skill, but I feel like getting the extra 25% action skill damage actually helps better than getting this melee explosion when you kill an enemy. Although this melee explosion would be better for mobbing. So, depending on what you're doing, you might want to change up what you got going on here. Alright, now let's get into the blue tree first. Alright, so I am doing my blue tree a bit differently than most people are, and yet a little bit similar. Now, most people are just stacking 5 out of 5 in Scorched Kairos and Tail of the Comet, which I don't blame them. That is a big old chunks of damage, but yet, even without all this, I'm still hitting just as hard or even harder than some of the builds that I've been seeing with the whip. And I am not even finished getting all the stuff that I want. So, you know, do what you will with that. Now you can sacrifice these 3 points of Eternal here for the extra action skill duration to go ahead and max out Scorched Kairos and get 4 out of 5 in Tail of the Comet. It'll give you a big damage bonus. You do want at least 1 point in Wrath of Nature like I have here for the extra status effect application chance, and Cryo Effectiveness will help you freeze enemies more often, and also will increase your chances of applying Tail of the Comet because Tail of the Comet is affected by status effect application chance on top of its base 30% chance to apply, which is really nice. Then you want 5 out of 5 in Ancient Ways for just pure cryo damage. Now, I've seen a lot of people using this electrical stuff here to get enhanced shock damage on top of what you get from the Watts for Dinner, but that's not really necessary. I do have 1 point here for my fire rate, but once again, we don't really use guns, so that part doesn't matter. We did get 5 out of 5 for Icy Rage here, which is a kill skill, which will be procced by something in our red tree, which I'll go ahead and show you. But killing an enemy with cryo damage from guns or status effects will grant a stack of Cryo Affinity for a duration. Cryo Affinity stacks grant increased gun damage. And you're like, well, why are we increasing gun damage in a build that doesn't use guns? We'll get to that when we get to our specialization. It is very important, but your stack durations are for 30 seconds. You can get up to 5 stacks, and with 5 out of 5 in this, you can get yourself up to a sweet little 31.25% gun damage, which is really nice. And then last but not least, we want to put 3 points in Age of Ice to do more damage to frozen enemies and bosses in particular. Also, I got 1 point of this for my class mod, which puts me at 4 out of 5, giving us a 24% bonus. Without it, you would be at an 18% bonus. Alright, now moving on to our red tree, which is why some of this stuff works. Now, also, I am doing this a bit differently than other people are, but also I will digress here as to why. So, first off, we want Discombobulate for the melee critical hit chance. We want all of Tritanium Knuckles for more melee and skill damage, which helps out a lot with our action skill stuff. Alright, and then you want a little bit of Gut Punch here, so melee damage and ornament damage have a chance to apply weakness, so weakness makes enemies deal reduced damage and take increased damage by 40% more damage that they take and deal 20% less damage. Or actually, other way around. I'm sorry, they deal 40% less damage and they take 20% more. I apologize, but we're going to leave that in there. Live bloopers again. Alright. Also, weakness is affected by status effect duration and is considered a status effect itself. So keep that in mind, as you could use that to do some crazy stuff. Alright, and then we move on to 2 out of 3 Gut Punch here. The reason we don't go 3 out of 3 is actually we're applying 2 out of 5 here for Bullet Storm, so whenever we do a status effect, we get increased gun damage for a direction stacking up, and you're like, well, why are we getting gun damage for a non-gun damage build? Once again, show you that in our specializations. Also, the best defense here to gain overshield for our melee hits. We only really need 1 point of that. Right? You do want all 5 points of Berserk here. Whenever you activate your Forge skill, you become Berserk for a duration, gaining slow immunity and bonus cryo damage with gun damage and melee damage. Bonus cryo damage being 60% for 15 seconds. That's really nice, but it's going to get even better with every stack of There Is Only Red, a kill skill. Whenever Amon kills an enemy when Berserk is active, it partially restores Berserk's duration and also increases the bonus cryo damage from Berserk. Each stack lasting 9 seconds and giving you 60% more bonus damage per kill, stacking up to 600%, which is insane. Alright, and then we went ahead and got 2 out of 5 here just to get down a little farther in the tree. Amon gains increased maximum health capacity, which increases his melee damage the more full his health is. So we get, you know, constant full health, so we get a constant 14% melee damage. Really freaking nice. And then this is where I differ also a little bit from everyone. Everybody has the all 3 points in My Touch is Death, but I used 2 points of that a little somewhere elsewhere in the blue tree, right? Whenever Amon deals melee damage, there's a chance to activate his kill skills, which gets the There Is Only Red poppin', okay, as well as our Icy Rage popping. Woo woo. Big stacks and big damage. Right? Now all that wraps up really nicely together once we get into our specializations. Right now I do not have enough specializations to get down to Honed Mind, which is where I want to be. So temporarily until I get here, I am using Now with Caffeine, which most of them are using to restore their action skill really fast. But honestly, if you're doing everything right with this build, by the time you have cleared everything on the map, your action skill should still definitely be up, and you should have plenty of time to get to your next encounter and have your action skill already cooled down. So, not really necessary. That being said, you could also very easily just switch to this, pop your rep kit a few times, cool your action skill down, and then switch back to this before you get into combat. Like, there's absolutely no problem with this, especially if playing single player when you can just pause the game and switch these things at will. But big important things we want is I Am a Gun. This is why we got all those gun damage bonuses, because that goes straight to our melee our action skill damage, which increases the power of our whips. Also, Bare Arms takes 50% of our gun damage and goes straight into our melee damage, which also increases the power of our whips. Also, that increases the power of the Shield Bash, which is the part that gets really crazy. Now, here's to why the Shield Bash starts getting really crazy, because all non-melee attack damage and slam damage are stored. Melee attacks and slam deal bonus connect melee damage based on the stored damage and consume it. For some reason, right now, it's not consuming it. Now, while we do already hit really hard with that stored damage on the first couple hits, and that's usually all you take for doing a boss, this is the reason we get into those crazy trillions of damage that I was showing you guys earlier. Right? But, like I said, once I get 7 more points here invested, I will be switching from Now with Caffeine to Honed Mind to do yet even more damage. Now, while I have everything going here, I want to go ahead and show you the difference with using these different grenades and everything. I'm going to start with the throwing knife. As you can see, we still have all of our stacks still going, so we don't even need to activate our wall again. But if we needed to, we could pop that bad boy and it'd be right back to it. But we already had all of our stacks up. Okay, so with the crit knife going, we're still hitting super hard per hit, but also just asinine shield bashes already, just right off the bat. Makes it stack up way faster with that. Or we can use the Slippy to make our stacks stack up even higher, a little bit faster, and keep our, you know, the red and our Berserk going even more. As each hit from that counts as melee and also continues to keep everything stacked up, which makes for a faster shield bash reaction. Anyway, guys, this is my Forge Knight build. Captain Kairos. I hope you guys enjoy and maybe, you know, can do a little bit of improvements and stuff as yourself. Either way, I hope you guys enjoy the build and thank you all for watching.